I mean, this is the vigil of the solemnity tomorrow. So let's open with a prayer. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Our Lady of Guadalupe, pray for us. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
Welcome, everyone.
Amen.
I'm Vicki Yamasaki, if you hadn't gathered that yet, but I'm the founder and chair of Corpus Christi for Unity and Peace, and I'll just make some introductory comments before we begin our program, which is the insidious attacks against the preborn. I really do want to thank everyone for coming out, and I especially want to thank our expert panelists here tonight, Sue Leibel from Susan B. Anthony. I want to say list, but it's Pro-Life America, and Thomas Ope of the Thomas More Society, Eggie Mayfield of the Indiana House of Representatives. Do we have a lineup for you? And a special thanks to our moderator, Professor Timothy O'Donnell, who will be moderating tonight's panel. So you can give him a round of applause. Thank you.
Hey.
I'd also like to extend thanks to Mary Kissel Photography and Ryan Henry for his videography, and all of our CUP volunteers that really made tonight just what it is. It's beautiful, isn't it? And Northside Events, don't they do a fabulous job? Big round of applause for them. Do we have new people from CUP that we're a 501c3, and all we're trying to do is just reach more Catholics and Christians, frankly, to defend our beliefs. And that's hard these days. It's very difficult. But tonight, we're gathered together not only for education, but for a very special purpose, because we're trying to raise needed funds for Voices for Life. So we're going to ask for that, because this pro-life, not-for-profit grassroots organization is in need of funds, and they are fighting on the front lines, and they're the ones, when Todd Rokita stood in front of that camera and said somebody has to step up and fight against the Department of Health, who is not producing the abortion reports. Somebody had to sue them. And it was Voices for Life, the only organization that decided to fight, okay? So they deserve our support, okay? I'm serious. It's courageous. It's really courageous what they did. And I'll tell you, we have to thank Thomas More Society. They deserve a round of applause, because without Thomas More Society, how do we defend the sanctity of life and our religious liberties? So a little bit of a commercial there for them. We have to stand together for this transparency and justice. So now let me introduce Professor Timothy O'Donnell. Our moderator tonight, Timothy O'Donnell, is a Roman Catholic, and he is a scholar. His primary academic interests are ethics and philosophy, and teaches at Ivy Tech and at Butler University. Timothy, I know personally, is very passionate about defending the sanctity of life, and he has been working in the pro-life ministry for well over 25 years with organizations such as 40 Days for Life, and he also serves on the board of directors of Sisters for the Poor, Right to Life, and Corpus Christi for Unity and Peace. I welcome to the podium Timothy O'Donnell.
Well, again, thank you all for being here at a crucial time. And what makes this a crucial time is, if I can borrow from Scripture for a quick moment, we have the blessing and we have the curse. We have the blessing and the, I mean by that, the blessing is Indiana is a very pro-life state. We've successfully, thanks to the support of the people of Indiana, our legislators, our governor, we have quite complete but very, very good pro-life law. So there's a little more work to be done, but we were out front once the Dobbs decision was handled down. So that's a great blessing to be a Hoosier and to be in a state that loves the most vulnerable who are in the most danger, and that's children in the womb. That's the great blessing, and we should all have hearts filled with gratitude for that work that was done, which we know ultimately was God answering our prayers. The curse is, though, like anything good, it's always under attack, right, by the evil one, right? That's what's going on. The curse is we cannot rest. We cannot put our guard down. We cannot take it easy. We cannot take a victory lap. We have to keep fighting. And how do we fight? It's prayer, it's fasting, it's making sacrifices, being courageous in the public square like each and every one of you are doing right now. Like by your very presence, you know being an active member of a pro-life community puts a target on your back. And it's no accident that you're here. Okay, it's not just happenstance. God specifically calls each and every one of us to be active in pro-life ministry, and you've responded to that, and I thank you for that. And in a particularly special way, I want to thank and acknowledge our panelists because of the work that they do. And if we have a target on our back, imagine the size and the bright red color of the target on their back, right? They are helping make a difference because they are putting their time and their talent and their treasure at risk for the kingdom. And we should all be very grateful. I know I'm very grateful for them being here tonight. Tonight, the format is going to be one of prepared questions. So it's not a debate. The questions are simply designed to help shape the conversation because we have a limited amount of time. And we're going to do that for maybe about an hour. And then we're going to open it up to Q&A from all of you. I also want to thank everyone online who's watching this live or who may in the future watch the recording of this. Thank you for joining us and being with us spiritually. So to begin with, what I'd like to do is I'm going to, and we can start over here with Sue. I'd like you, Sue, to just take maybe 3-5 minutes. Just introduce yourself and the organization that you're with, and let us get to know you just a little bit.
Okay, great. Can you hear me? Okay, hi. Thank you. I'm Sue Liebel. I am the State Affairs Director for Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America, which is a national organization in Washington. I happen to live right here in Indianapolis. In fact, I live one stoplight away. So thanks for having me. It's really easy to get here. No, I've been a lobbyist in the state of Indiana for over 30 years. Here in Indianapolis, I was with United Way for 10 years. I was with the Chamber of Commerce, and then for a while, and then with Indiana Right to Life for over a decade. Then I went to work for Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America, and now I go to lots of states, not just Indiana. So it's a privilege and an honor to represent the unborn in the public square, which I view, and I hope you will too, as a mission field. Where do we send missionaries? To places that need the light of Christ and the light of love and life. So look at it that way and get involved, and I'd love to work with you. Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America is the nation's largest pro-life organization with over 1 million Americans who are committed to protecting the unborn. Our mission is to end abortion by electing leaders and advocating for laws that save lives, with a special calling to promote women leaders like Susan B. Anthony, that kind of thing. Representative Mayfield, I've known for many years, and she's in our National Pro-Life Women's Caucus. We're mostly at the federal level to help elect pro-life people to the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate and the presidency. And this is because primarily the U.S. Senate is who approves the president's Supreme Court nominees. So that is a key target for us in our efforts. We invest very heavily in voter education to make sure that Americans know where their lawmakers stand on protecting the unborn. A disclaimer, it's going to sound like, and I guess it is, that I'm going to be talking politics tonight. But really, if I say Republican or Democrat, I want you to know ahead of time that I'm talking about their platform, what they say they believe, what they adhere to. I'm not talking about any one individual or who to vote for or anything like that. I'm talking about kind of the baseball of politics and who's who. So if you hear that please know that I'm not trying to be political tonight. And if you disagree with anything I say, you can see me afterwards and we'll duke it out. It's absolutely fine. Absolutely fine. Last election cycle in 2022, Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America spent $78 million and reached a total of 8 million voters. This year, we're on track to spend our largest ever, $92 million, and we're going to reach 10 million voters. Our claim to fame is our canvassing program. We pay people to visit people at their homes and the poor guy is watching a football game and we knock on the door and he gets up and he's like, want to talk about abortion? But we try to engage people at their door and talk about the current, whoever the current senator is or congressman and their voting record. Did you know they voted for taxpayer-funded abortion or this or that? And did you know that the candidate will not? And our goal is to get more pro-life people to the polls. My role, though, is not that. As I mentioned, I've been a lobbyist in Indiana, and my job is state-level policy. So we knew years ago that Roe versus Wade would someday be overturned, and it would go to the states. Well, mostly it goes to the states. There's still a role for Congress, but I helped SBA prototype. What would that look like if a national organization sent people to state legislatures? How does that work? And before Roe fell, I helped states pass anti-discrimination. It's back under Roe, you can't abort a baby with Down syndrome or something like that. That's discrimination. Or the fetal pain limit. If a baby can feel pain, a state would not be able to go past that. But since Roe fell, my team works with states all across the country to help them pass gestational limits to save as many lives as possible, enact the laws that the states do have, and then beat back those ballot measures. So that, in a nutshell, that's who I am and what I do.
All right. Thank you, Sue. Thomas, let's turn to you.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Very nice to be here. I hail from outside of Chicago. I drove down this afternoon. Beautiful day. It's lovely to be here in Indiana. Partially because I have to compare it with Illinois. So I work for the Thomas More Society. The Thomas More Society has been around since the late 1980s. It started as a support group for sidewalk counselors. And my boss is Tom Brecka, who was the founder of the Thomas More Society. He was a business lawyer, making his way through life, working at a law firm. Somebody asked him, hey, would you get involved with this guy, Joe Scheidler? Joe Scheidler his wife kicked his rear end into the pro-life movement. He was a salesman, but he went head first into the pro-life movement. And lo and behold, before a few years went by, some law professor from the University of Chicago came up with a theory against the sidewalk counseling work he was doing, saying, hey, you're trying to shut down abortion clinics. That's a violation of the antitrust laws. You're trying to curtail commercial activity. And so Tom Brecka, who is a commercial lawyer, was called into the case. And as a result of him being involved, they started to litigate these issues. And one by one, the other attorneys pulled out of the case, leaving Tom there by himself. His law firm, Joe Schuyler, wasn't exactly, weighed down with money, and he didn't pay a lot to Tom. And Tom's law firm then said, hey, you better boot Joe Schuyler out, or maybe you should consider leaving and going to work for him full time. So anyway, Tom couldn't let the case go, and he then left his law firm, and in order to support his family, he started to ask, he got the donors list from the Pro-Life Action League, and he started the Thomas More Society, which is a 501c3 public interest national law firm now. And so that was in the late 1990s. So it's been 25 years now. Well, during the course of that time, a lot of people in the pro-life movement called Tom up on the phone and said, hey, here's my problem. Would you help me? And, TMS, the Thomas More Society, was like the only, player in town in the beginning.
Right.
And as time goes by, it just grows because of the need for support of sidewalk counselors. And what is that support? Basically, First Amendment, which is, hey, you have a right to be on the public sidewalk and reach out to women and help them decide for a life decision. So that's what the Thomas More Society has been doing. As a result of being in business and a lot of people calling us, we work pro bono, we don't charge anything. But you people and people who are of similar mind support us. We're involved in over 100 lawsuits throughout the country. We have lawyers now in Richmond, Indiana, Virginia, New York, Tupelo, Mississippi, North Carolina, Omaha, the West Coast, all essentially getting involved with all of these issues. And so that's and I've been working at TMS for 10 years now. And I consider it a great blessing that I'm able to work with a wonderful guy, Thomas Brecka, and work on issues that are really important in our country. So that's me.
Great, thank you. I noticed there's a lot of Thomases there. Thomas More,
Right.
Thomas Brecka. So, okay.
We work
probably
with
more.
we work with two Thomases in Pennsylvania. Our publicist is a Thomas.
So
And
if
of
you're
course-
in law school and your
of
name's
course-
Thomas,
And of course, the big portrait on the wall is one Thomas More.
who is a great saint, a
Right.
great saint, a great martyr for the truth.
Right.
All right, Peggy, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Good evening. I'm glad you're all here, and I love to have this conversation in a non-contentious type of environment. I'm Peggy Mayfield. I was elected in 2012, so I started serving in 2013. I actually grew up in Indianapolis. I'm a product of the Archdiocese of Indianapolis. I attended Cathedral and ultimately graduated from North Central. And then my adult life, married my husband, and which, by the way, we celebrate our 40th anniversary in about 2 weeks. It's coming up faster than I anticipated. But now I live in Morgan County, just north of Martinsville. Did not see being a legislator on my radar at all. I hated politics. I mean, honestly, my husband ran campaigns, and I told him if he ran another one, that's it. And then 20 years later, I was the one who decided that I was going to run for office, and he supported me 100%. And I've been here ever since, always knowing that I would support a pro-life platform. And that seems easy. It's not as easy as you think. But so, I always plan on voting for it. I never anticipated authoring bills, and I sure as heck never thought that any of my bills would go to the U.S. Supreme Court. 3 of the bills with my name on it have gone to the U.S. Supreme Court. Sue referred to one of them with the discrimination for things like Down syndrome. That was in the Supreme Court for a record-setting, I think, 15 times being on the docket before they decided that they were not going to address it. The previous record had been, I think, 13 times. There was that one, and then I remember Sue and I sitting down, literally nitpicking legislation. I changed a period to a semicolon, and it went to the Supreme Court because it changed the meaning and the sequence of things. So that was on ultrasounds. We won that one, by the way. And then there was a third one, and I'm sorry if I can't remember right now what that was, but we won it as well. So that I just never, ever saw that in my future. I've made a list a while back. You know, I started co-authoring bills as I came into the legislature. You know, you don't have a lot of experience. This is a very charged topic, so I'm not a public speaker, and I wasn't good at confrontation or discussion. So I started off as a co-author and learned a lot. By the way, that's the first time I've heard the purpose of the founding of the St. Thomas More Society was litigation on abortion clinics. I never knew that, so you learn something new every day. But then I became a primary author, or actually the primary sponsor, when, you know, Sue, I keep coming up with your name because so much of my pro-life advocacy in the House of Representatives has your fingerprints on it. But she came to me one day and said, we need a sponsor for this bill coming over from the Senate. And I was not prepared for it. It was on their final vote. What had happened was the original author in the House, it was very technical, very legal. And we had someone who was well-versed in those areas, but all of a sudden they couldn't take it. And she said, will you take it? And so it literally landed in my lap. And it was a very difficult bill for a layperson to explain and carry. I nearly blew it. The speaker had to save me twice at the podium because I had misstated something. So, but it ultimately passed. Of course, almost everything that I had my name on it was challenged in court. In federal court. It has been a real education on the legislative process because on this topic, when you use the word insidious, and I want to wrap this up because there's going to be a lot of other questions to go into this, but when you use the word insidious, when we're dealing with, or when I'm dealing with abortion legislation, it all makes sense to me. What I'm doing, what I'm trying to accomplish. It's common sense. Until the other side or the opponents come out of left field with an argument that you would never have anticipated. And so then, and that's, I think we're going to get into that a little bit more later. That has taught me a lot about what we want to accomplish, what we can accomplish, and what we have to be very careful about what we try to accomplish because that could open a door for the opposition. So I'll wrap up for now. I just want to say thank you very much for being here. I think it's very important to share with you that the process, the legislative process, the legal process is not as easy as it looks. That's why sometimes you might not see us step forward with something as bold as you would like us to do, or that we would like to do. I had one bill after the Dobbs case where we were going to change some things, and there are some legal implications that would have left a door open for a possible overturn of our abortion ban. So as much as I wanted to move forward with what I think is right, I had to step back and leave things as they are in order to protect all of the children and all of the mothers that we could at the time. So I'll leave it there and we'll go on. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Peggy. Thank you. Fortunately, the questions are written down in 8 font, so I'm going to have to, and I'm the one who did that, so no one to blame but myself. Okay, let me throw this question out to the panel. There are 24 states, I think that's right, or it's close, 24 states currently with common sense pro-life laws that effectively have prohibitions against aborting babies before they're 15 weeks old of gestation. Has there been a particular strategy or set of tactics that have proven to be effective? So we have in 24 states some pro-life laws. What's working, do you think? Peggy, I can see you. By the way, as a professor, if you make eye contact, I call on you. And if you fail to make eye contact, I still call on you.
In the legislative process, a lot of the bills that I have worked on, I have to keep in mind that there are multiple judicial circuits throughout the United States, and each of them have their own little leanings. You've heard about the Ninth Circuit Court out in the California area, the Seventh Circuit, where we are at, is based out of Chicago. If I get this right, the Sixth or the Fifth is the Kansas area, and they're a little more pro-life leaning. So when you have different states promoting similar laws that will ultimately be litigated, sometimes you will get a conflicting opinion from that federal court, from another federal court in another part of the country. So when that happens, when you have conflicting opinions, that's when it generally will go up to the U.S. Supreme Court to clarify or to make the decision on that, but not always. So if that is your strategy, and sometimes it's not your strategy, it just happens, but you have to realize that even very similarly worded legislation, and I can get on conference calls and we parse individual words, literally, to make sure that it's not vague or it would open the door to something. So it's a lot of hard work to make sure that you're ultimately getting to the goal of passing a law that protects mothers and children.
Great. Now, Sue, Thomas, you guys have a national perch as well. Sue, what would you like to add?
So I want to be kind of pre-Dobbs and post-Dobbs. So under Roe, one of the particular successful strategies are states that could pass what we call trigger laws. And so a lot of states, even back in the 70s when Roe first happened, passed a law that said when Roe is ever overturned, then our state will make abortion illegal. And those laws sat there for all those years until the Dobbs decision. And so several states had those already sitting there waiting. Now in Indiana, you couldn't do that. And constitutionally, I am told, here's your expert right here, but we were told that you can't do an if-then type of thing. If another branch of government does something, then we'll do this. So they had to wait until Dobbs. And then as you remember, they went right into session in July, like the next month, boom, they did that. I think those trigger laws account for some of those 24 states. And then post-Dobbs, you saw a lot of states like Indiana rushing to make some decisions. The strategy there, and still is today, that's been like 2 years. This will be our third session coming up. The strategy there is, what do you have the votes for? So let's say the Mississippi legislature has, for the sake of argument, has 100 members. Well, do you have 51 votes to make abortion illegal, or maybe not all the way? Maybe they want some exceptions. We have to negotiate that, or maybe they want a heartbeat. Maybe they don't have all the way, but they'll vote for a heartbeat bill. And we fought like, you know where, a hot place in North Carolina, because we thought they're pretty purple. They're not real conservative anymore. Let's try a heartbeat bill. Didn't have the votes. Did not have the votes, even among the Republicans. So we had to go ratchet down to try a 15-week bill, actually, which is when a baby can feel pain. So that's sellable. And then they ended up with, a 12-week bill, then they ended up with a 15-week bill. Well, that's very disappointing, right? When you want no abortion, then you're going to negotiate for a heartbeat, then you're going to negotiate for 12 weeks, and then you end up getting a 15-week, and so you're like, well, that's no fun. You know, that's disappointing. But if you've got 100 people, what are your votes? That's what you're going to get. That's why elections have consequences, severe consequences. Don't ever let it be about who's more attractive, or you know someone, or that's someone's son or daughter. Don't ever do that again. Make sure you know what they're for. Because once they sit down and those 100 people were sitting there, what are we going to get? And we had to negotiate to get as best as possible, at least for now. At least for now. Then when there's more elections, we can try to get more pro-life people elected to strengthen those laws. And that's kind of what's happening today, is getting more and more laws strengthened. We'll be spending another 2 decades doing that in some of those states, like I mentioned.
Thomas, anything you'd like to add?
Just that Thomas More Society is mostly involved in litigation, and part of the legislative process is to prevent bad laws from going into effect. So we have people looking at those laws and saying, hey, how can we prevent, how can we attack this law? And so we may file a lawsuit to try and prevent the law from going into effect. In Illinois, for example, there was a law that was passed last year called 1909, and it was completely discriminatory against pregnancy centers, basically saying, you pregnancy centers are involved in deceptive advertising, and we're going to sue you guys if you open your mouths. So we then went to court and said, hey, this is viewpoint discriminatory. They don't have that kind of law with an abortion clinic. They're just trying to shut down pregnancy center speech, which is a violation of the First Amendment. And so we got the court in Rockford, Illinois, to say, this is a stupid law, and I'm going to enjoin it.
Is that a
He
legal
said that
term?
from the bench. He said, why would anybody, because one piece of evidence was there were never any complaints with the state, but it's all political. All abortion is all political. So anyway, we get involved with litigation. We do try and help legislators before before a bill is passed. And right now we're involved with, like, Missouri. Missouri just a couple of days ago said they're going to have a ballot initiative. And I forgot to mention that Mr. Martin, right? His daughter works for the Thomas More Society in St. Louis, and she's Mary Catherine, and she's working on that case. And her twin sister, by the way, she went to Harvard, and her twin sister went to Yale, I think. And her sister's now, she also worked for Thomas More, and now she's a federal judge in St. Louis. So we try to work with stellar attorneys, and there's 2 of them right there.
Thank you, Mr. Martin.
Thank you.
Tim, if I could add one more
Yes,
to the,
please,
just
ma'am.
very quickly. The way I read this question is that you'd say common sense laws protecting up to 15 weeks of gestation. That's, to me, if I'm reading it correctly, that's not really common sense, because 15 weeks of gestation, like, I understand that 90% of your abortions happen before 12 weeks. But it's being promoted as, well, that's a reasonable time for a woman to find out that she's pregnant. 90% of your babies will be dead by the time this deadline comes up.
Thank you for that. That's an
right.
excellent point.
exactly right.
And that gets down to the kind of the politics of it, probably, and what's passable, which actually leads me to another question for the panel, which is, I'm going to go to this one, which is, maybe you could give us, Peggy, we start with you. What's sort of the temperature of the State House for any further, maybe tell us kind of where are we in Indiana with our pro-life laws? Like, what exceptions do we allow? And then what's the temperature for maybe closing gaps in the state of Indiana for those exceptions? Like, is there an appetite for it? Is there not?
I would say there's less of an appetite, only because we got in in our abortion ban. We got as much as we could with the votes that we had. It was very tenuous. And in the Senate, which is where Senate Bill 1 came out of, the lieutenant governor, who does not vote on legislation, had to vote to cast the 26th vote to put it into the majority vote. If you had to have 25, if you had 25 or less, it does not pass. It doesn't fail, but it doesn't pass. So she had to cast a vote just to get it out of the Senate. We were offering several amendments to it in the House, and it was very tenuous. Earlier, Melanie, when you were speaking about Voices for Life and the lawsuit about getting the TPRs, I had an amendment that would have required exactly that. They had to give us the information, and it did not pass. And sometimes I want to say, I told you so, because now we're in this situation where we can't get any of the TPRs. If we'd lost a vote, we wouldn't have a ban. And that's how tenuous it was. And coming up again, I don't know if you get another election cycle. I'm not sure if people, if the legislators, put it this way, it's easier to fight for your principles than to live by them. I thanked many of my colleagues who I knew were in hard spots when they cast a vote in favor of one of my abortion bills. And I will never forget the one day when one of them responded with, "I didn't want to vote for it, I had to." And I thought, well, you could have gone without saying that and just said thanks. But it's very difficult for people. They are in, I don't know their personal story. I don't know their district on that topic as much. So, I mean, we got a 95% abortion ban. Yeah. And I think that we ought to be very thankful for that. That took 50 years to get, so let's not turn
That's
around and demand the whole pie immediately. We may have to wait and be very strategic in our next move as well. I had a bill that would have done something if I touched the abortion, Title 20, is it 20? 16, Title 16 in the abortion, the code. If I touch that, that opens it for any other amendment. And you can be guaranteed that any opponent of our abortion ban would be piling on amendments trying to overturn our ban. So for me to open that door, I don't know if I could live with myself just to get my piece that would threaten the entire law.
Thank you. And that kind of anticipates where I want to go next, which is really, again, kind of sticking with the state of Indiana initially, but then anything at the national level. Let me turn to you again, Sue. What the name of tonight's event is around the insidious attacks against the preborn. What do you think are the one or two of the current attacks that pro-life legislation faces, or obstacles that, say, like a state may face in getting more effective pro-life legislation through?
Well, it's been fascinating, actually. It's been maddening, but fascinating to watch after the Dobbs decision at the state level. There were 3 states that summer, including Indiana, West Virginia, South Carolina, that had special sessions. And then the rest of them all went back into session in January. That reshuffled the deck a lot. So if, I think Peggy's alluded to that, if you said you were pro-life all these years, and then maybe not so much anymore. And so we had to kind of recount who's in what seat and who's coming from what direction and how strong are they. They were reading polling, and they were here. Now, of course, Roe had just been overturned, and so the media went berserk with it, and people heard things and thought things. Well, one of the things we find when we go visit people at their homes, like what I was saying earlier, and we talk to them about abortion, is a lot of people don't even know what abortion is. They don't believe it goes as far as it does. A lot of people who really don't understand what's happening. And anyway, so we still have a lot of education to do, that it really is true. It really happens, and it happens later and all the other stuff. Also, a couple other things I wanted to mention is the other side has well, has the media at its behest. And so the media is a friend to the other side. So we're kind of outnumbered 2-to-1, you know? And so it's hard to get our message heard. It's hard to get the facts out there, that sort of thing. So we have to work even harder and more creatively to get our message out. But also, the other thing that we have seen greatly is that the other side, and by that I mean the pro-abortion politically, the abortion industry, abortion doctors, the abortion people, they lie. Now, I don't use that word lightly. I don't just walk around saying somebody lies. But they literally put up television commercials, like in Ohio, the ballot amendment, if this doesn't pass, women will die. Well, that's not true. And in fact, you may have even heard yourself, can a doctor treat an ectopic pregnancy or a miscarriage, or if a woman has a life-threatening well, of course they can. In fact, we did an analysis of all 50 states, even the blue states, even California, have in their laws that medically treating these conditions is not abortion. It's treating the mother. If the baby ends up dying because of it, you're really trying to save them both, if you see what I'm saying. And the irony is that's medical care. That's health care. Abortion isn't health care. Abortion is, I'm clicking, aren't I? I'm sorry about, oh, it's my thing, sorry. Abortion is a procedure. It is not to make someone healthier. It's a procedure. So the irony is the other side is using a lot of deceptive advertising, and so be very careful. I'm just going to stop that. Be very careful what you see and what you read. The other thing that I want to say from a national perspective, which I know we're talking a lot about Indiana, but if the Biden administration, or excuse me, if the Harris administration is allowed to go on, if they win, they already have a bill right now. It's actually already in Congress, but it's not moving because we have a divided, like, House of Republicans, so we can't get anything done. But if they win, they have a bill that will wipe out all 50 state regulations. So the conversation we're having tonight, if they win at the federal level, they're going to undo all that, and they're going to have a new federal. They're going to take Roe. They're going to bring Roe back, not in a court case, but by law.
Only if they get control of both houses.
Well, that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
So it's not just the presidential election that's important, it's the state level of the legislature.
No, what I'm saying is the U.S. Congress, the U.S. House, and the U.S. Senate. Yeah, yeah. So that's why we want to pay. I was just flipping to national for just a second. The other thing I want to mention, if I may please, is that we are a little closer than we realize, I think, to a change, a death or a retirement or something in the Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court. The justices that overturned Roe are hanging on to see what's going to happen with this next election. But we are a little closer than I think we realize to stepping backwards, so we need to be really vigilant about the federal elections as well as the state. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And just because we are going to go to Q&A here with all of you in about 15 minutes or so, I do want to pivot the conversation a little bit to what has, from my reading, turned into the number one method of abortion, which is chemical abortion. So these are the abortion pills, mifepristone and mifeprotocol.
Misoprostol.
Thank you.
Misoprostol.
You can tell I didn't go to medical school, so thank you for that. But I would like I'd like the panel to comment on what we're seeing in the state of Indiana with that pivot, because I believe the law in Indiana is that Walgreens and CVS that actually started to carry those lethal products are prohibited from selling those here in the state of Indiana, but then there's also how do you enforce that? So we're hearing stories of women going online, and it's not just women. We have to remember too, if I may make a quick side point, abortion isn't just a woman who's abortion-minded seeking an abortion. It's also women who are caught up and being victimized in human trafficking and prostitution and the sex trade. And that's a whole even uglier side, if there is, of abortion. So what do you think, what's the state of affairs in Indiana, if any of you have any information about chemical abortions, what's happening on that front here in the state or at the national level?
Well, I brought a chart. It's hard to see. Sorry. This chart, if you can see it all, the yellow line or the orange line are the pills, and the blue is the surgical. Now, the one thing you want to see on this chart is after our law went into effect, boom, the number of abortions went way down in Indiana. Our abortion number is down 98%. But on this chart, chemical abortion, we call it chemical abortion or abortion pills, is up higher now than surgical abortions. The orange is above the blue, and now almost 60% of all abortions in Indiana are through the drugs. Unfortunately, the drugs have a 4 times greater rate of complications. Women get sicker faster when they take the drugs. And so by default, you're going to have more emergency room visits, and something I go around the country talking to states about. And we instituted, I believe it was Representative Mayfield's bill again, where we instituted the mandatory reporting of complications in emergency rooms. And last year, there were 45 abortions reported by the State Department of Health in the state of Indiana, and 42% of those were because of the pills, with retained tissue, bleeding, and infection, sepsis, because all of the body parts didn't come out. She ends up getting an infection. She ends up needing surgery to correct that. So there's a little bit of fact to put behind that, what's happening. It's very hard. CVS, Walgreens, those companies, those are national companies, and they tend to follow the law. They know that Indiana law says that mail-order abortion is against the law. Our law bans mail-order abortion. They're not going to risk that. They're not selling in states where it's illegal. It's not them. It's these companies called 8Access or PlanCpills.com. Those sites that sell Viagra and diet pills and those kinds of sites. Do you know what I mean? Like icky sites. That's where these women are getting majority of those pills. But the only data we have and the only data we can track is when they're in the emergency room and when we see those complications.
I could speak not so much about Indiana, but more nationally. We're involved in lawsuits in New York and in California, where the Attorney General there is trying to prevent pregnancy centers from offering information on abortion pill reversal. In New York, Letitia James has sued, I don't know, between 10 and 15 pregnancy centers, claiming that they're offering false information, which is an absolute lie.
Yeah.
Because abortion pill reversal is a simple process of progesterone, and it's safe. So what we experienced after Dobbs is, number one, Biden started using the FACE Act. Now, the FACE Act is called the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act. It was passed in 1994 as a result of the Operation Rescue movement when Clinton got elected. You know, these things happened during the Democratic control. And after Dobbs, they started using FACE, and they would go back years of incidents that occurred. So, for example, we represented Mark Houck in Philadelphia, who was protecting his son, and so he was kind of getting attacked, and he pushed the pro-abort clinic counselor or person, and he fell down, and the local authorities wouldn't even prosecute it. They didn't think that anything went wrong. Well, the Justice Department filed FACE Act charges against Mark Houck. And we hired a fancy attorney in Philadelphia and beat him, which was, an important thing to do. Costs a lot of money to do that. But we're also involved with Paul Vaughn here in Nashville. There's a case now in Ohio. There's one in Michigan. So that's one tactic they're using, right? Another one is go after the pregnancy centers to shut down their speech about abortion pill reversal. Because as Sue said, most of the abortions are pill abortions now. Well, we have to make sure that we can get the message out. And so my main point is that, number one, it's just as contentious as it was before Dobbs. And two, all these issues of support of the pro-life movement are just as important or more important now.
Thank you for that. I think it was interesting too in the Howe case. Not only did they level the power of the Justice Department against him, but remember he's a very devout Catholic with a wife and 7 children, and they sent the FBI guns loaded and pointed to his house in the wee hours of the morning, which is it's a scare tactic and intimidation, because if they can do it to him, they certainly might do it to us. So thank you for pointing that out.
Right.
Yeah.
So we've got a few minutes before we open it up for Q&A. So please think about the questions you'd like to ask the panel. Let me ask this one. In what ways, if any, have you seen our opponents on the pro-abortion side use or twist current laws on the book against us? And here, I think of like religious liberty claims that we've heard where the Satanic Temple, for example, wants to have abortion legalized because abortion is part of their ritual.
The Satanic Temple is a clown organization. In their lawsuit in Indiana, they were found not to have standing. But you see them all through the country filing these lawsuits. I don't know who's supporting them. They're absolutely
That's Satan?
pernicious.
Okay, Satan's supporting. No,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
yeah, financially. In any event, one of the pernicious lawsuits I see is the one we're involved in here in Indiana with the Department of Public Health, which Melanie talked about, the TPRs, termination of pregnancy reports, which they had given out for decades, and now just because they don't want to anymore, they say we're not going to do it anymore, and screw you. Hey, we're just not going to do it. And they go to the public access counselor, and he agrees with them. And as Todd Rokita said, they didn't come to the Attorney General and get the Attorney General's advice, who is the chief legal officer in Indiana. It's outrageous what they're doing. And forcing somebody, as Todd said, hey, I can't do it. Somebody's got to step up to the plate and take action here. So we're involved in litigation. We heard that the law didn't get passed in the legislature for probably a good reason, tactically. So now we're in court trying to, and their argument is there's a medical records exemption for in the privacy law. But they're saying that, but TPRs they anonymize the data. So it's not linked to any patient. Well, how can that be a medical record then? You couldn't use that data to treat anybody, could you? No. So it's not a medical record, but they're alleging that it's a medical record. So anyway, we're going to court to try and prove that. But that's just an example of how extreme the abortion conflict is in this country.
We haven't talked about this yet tonight, but there's a really important thing that I like to bring up anytime I'm talking in Indiana. So when we passed Senate Bill 1, which is arguably a very good bill, has stopped a lot of abortions, but it shifted all the abortions from abortion clinics to hospitals. So there is no such thing in the law as an abortion clinic in Indiana anymore. They crossed that out. And if it's, whether it's for the mother's health or rape and incest or a lethal fetal anomaly, which I'd like to mention later if I may, but there's exceptions. If there is going to be one, it has to be done in a hospital. Okay. Now let's think about that for just a minute. When the Senate Bill 1 first came out, the very first edition of the bill looked very different than what it looks like today. It was actually pro-abortion, and it was pro-medical community. And now, these are some of the things you can't quite prove. So I'm just wondering who wrote that bill. Anyone? Anyone? If all the business goes to the hospitals? I don't know. I don't know. I'm just wondering. Anyway, that's how it passed. So we have no more clinics, which is fine, but now we're all in a hospital. The Department of Health always has regulated and has a good relationship with Indiana hospitals, Indiana Medical Association, Indiana doctors groups. They inspect, they do all kinds of things in that medical space, right? And so that's now where they are. They go with their friends in the medical community. Well, who would not want their name on a paper? A doctor that does an abortion in a, even if it's for one of the reasons, right? But I did that abortion, and here's my form. But I don't want the public seeing that. I don't want the public seeing it was my hospital that did. The hospitals don't want you to know it's political. This is what I'm getting at. Now, can I back up everything I just said? Maybe not. But I have a sneaking suspicion, and I hear a lot of things behind the scenes, that now that we're in that medical space with abortion, we're going to be getting pushback. Now, I'm an old scrappy lobbyist, and when I would go into the House or Senate, when I would testify for or against a bill, it would be the Planned Parenthood lobbyist that would be on the other side of me, right? Whatever they were for, I was against. I'm for, they're against, right? Well, they're not there anymore. And it's the medical community that is throwing some marbles under the floor for us to trip on these days. And that's not just in Indiana. I see it in other states. I see that across the country. We're saying we can't treat women and we can't do this, we can't do that. So I am not besmirching the entire medical community. But I am saying that there is now a new special interest in the abortion space, and that's the medical community.
All right, thank you. Well, at this point, I think we'll turn it over to
Can
all
we
of
give
you.
them a round of applause, please?
Yeah.
And before anyone departs, we're going to now begin to pass the basket as we pose questions, and allow me to get to you with the mic so everyone can hear your question. Larry will be coming around to each of your tables and passing the basket. Please be generous, dig deep for Voices for Life, will you please? And I was the first, so I'll be the role model. I visited my donor, my investment advisor today, and I delivered the first check, okay? So I'm being the role model. I hope you all do this as well. So I will ask the first question, and then I'll give everybody an opportunity to raise your hand. So I'm trying to think, with the elections coming up, what will be the strategy over the next year to 2 years as they try to claw back the advances that have actually been made to half the states? Will it be constitutional measures? Will it be lack of enforcement? Just to simply say, because we even had Ryan Mears here, a prosecutor, we had something happen here. And he just simply said, I'm not prosecuting it. And it was a complete violation of the law. So will it be something like that, or will it be that they will do what we did for years on the pro-life side, which is an incremental approach to a march toward what they had before, which is the 24-week? So whoever wants to answer that question.
Well, you talk about an incremental approach is what we did.
Yeah.
Don't forget, that's exactly what they have been doing. They have been gaslighting everybody into believing that it's a blob of cells, it's a simple procedure. So they are, I hate to say, even better versed in the incremental approach than the pro-life group is, because we want the whole ball of wax right now. And that doesn't really work in the legislative space. And they just keep inching it forward little by little, switching minds. And that's why they have been more successful than we have.
I would add that their incremental is bigger chunks than our incremental. So when they go for these ballot questions, what they're trying to do is change a state's constitution so that the constitution of Ohio or Michigan or Arizona gives a right to abortion. And that puts us back on the increment. So they're going for the whole enchilada in the actual Constitution. So that's a real problem. The other thing I would say, just to answer that quickly, is at the state level, like in Indiana, we're in really good standing, and we don't have one of those citizen petition things. So thank God that won't happen here. But they'll do incremental. But if they win at the national level, they'll do it in one fell swoop. They won't do anything incremental. At the national level, you've even heard them say they want to stack the Supreme Court. They want to expand the numbers of Supreme Court justices. All kinds of ideas they have. And it will be one fell swoop over the whole country. They don't care about the states anymore. It'll go right back to federal.
What we look for is the effectiveness of the pro-life outreach. And we look at sidewalk counselors, we look at pregnancy centers, and we see that they're trying to curtail communication. Carbondale, Illinois passed a bubble zone law. They passed one in San Diego. These things are going to continue. The various different free speech restrictions that I talked about earlier. You know, what I think is important is that pro-life speech be protected in our country, the First Amendment. And because how can anybody go out and make a pro-life pitch if you don't have a right to speak on the public sidewalk? And so that's what's going to happen here. But the First Amendment is the most important right we have as Americans, and that has to be protected. And the Thomas More Society is going to do that.
Oh, my goodness. You guys are so smart. We have the brain trust up here.
Ouch, sorry. Hi, I'm LK. This question really is for both Sue and our legislator. Back in the beginning, when Roe happened, it was supposed to be rare. It was supposed to be between the doctor and his patient, and they were counting on the doctor to have some scruples, which we know that has gone. So when I'm addressing what you said about the healthcare group, when they throw it into that dark hole of the medical and the privacy between, the doctor and the patient, now you really get things messed up. And then for you, they have been manipulating language like crazy to make it as muddy and as evasive and as unclear as possible so that somebody said, well, I could sort of agree with that. And you're agreeing with nothing is basically what you're agreeing with. So my question is, how do we combat those evil people?
Well, the one thing I'd like to add to what you're saying is that at some point then, after 1973, when Roe became the law, this became an industry. This became a business, a big business. And they were about, even Abby Johnson, who used to run a clinic, said they had sales quotas every week of how many abortions they would sell. In fact, I think still sometimes I see in legislators across, still sometimes some elected officials don't understand that there's a cost center here. So when we go into the hospitals now, like in Indiana and a couple of other states, because we have at least a lethal fetal anomaly, a baby with a severe disability, that's also a cost center. That's a procedure. You need a surgical suite. You need personnel. Insurance will cover it. So let's all be sharp and keen about this. Let's be realistic about that. So that's still there. I think, and I'll let Peggy answer, I think the answer for us now, especially since it's gone into the healthcare thing, is to talk to women, is to get our message out to women. And I don't mean get them a policy paper. I mean to get some really cool, hip ads on Facebook that I don't even know how to do. You know what I mean? And TikTok and stuff like that, I don't even know, but they know. And warn, this is a public health issue, especially the pills. And we need to get a lot more hip. And I've said for years we need to hire a Madison Avenue advertising firm. I want the guys with purple hair and piercings, but if they know how to sell a blue Honda, not a green one, a blue one, to get you to buy a blue one, that's who I want talking to those women. We've got to play this game like they play this game. Peggy?
I think a large part of it is going to be supporting those women and children after birth. We've done that in Senate Bill 2 when we passed the abortion ban. We also passed Senate Bill 2, which was a lot of financial supports for crisis pregnancy centers, all kinds of alternatives. It wasn't just, it was expanding Medicaid to a much further point in the baby's life. I've had one change of heart on abortion policy in all the times that I've carried a bill. And it finally occurred to me out of the blue one day that every single woman I talked to about abortion has only been alive when it was legal. That is where we have to start. If they think that we're actually taking something away that they were entitled to. And so we have to change that conversation to supporting them in their decision to carry out the pregnancy.
Right, yeah.
If I may jump in, I know the facilitator, but as a professor of ethics in a community college, which is really kind of mission territory, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Here's what I've seen in ethics, because we talk about abortion. Students are given an opportunity to pick an ethical topic, and I always have a class of 30, I always have 3 or 4, maybe 5 pick pro-life or abortion as the topic, and they have to research it. And they have to research and present in their paper both sides, and their grade isn't dependent on how they, it's how well they argue it, not which conclusion they reach. And here's what I've noticed since Dobbs. And I've been teaching for over 10 years, almost 15. Prior to the Dobbs decision, I never saw a student change her mind or his mind. They never changed their mind. After Dobbs, I'm starting to see that, and I have seen it. And I'll tell you why, because the law is a teacher.
Yeah.
Go back to Cicero, go back to Aquinas, go back to Augustine, Martin Luther King, letter from Birmingham jail. The law is a teacher. It schools us. So when the law makes something legal, we generally are going to think it's moral, it's allowed, it's a good thing, it's permissible, and that's why it feels like a takeaway. Roe was always an unjust law because it violates the natural law and it violates God's law about killing the innocent.
Amen.
So I do think education is a big part of it. And I'm probably as outnumbered on my campus as you guys are in the circles you travel in. But I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic because God delivered us a victory in Dobbs, and he's entrusted us with the next chapter of our mission. to defend the sanctity of life. And I think education's a
said.
part of it.
Tim, I've worked in the pro-life movement for decades.
You and I, full disclosure, have
Hey,
been
you and I
shoulder to
together.
shoulder out there many times, my friend.
I have a different question here. I have never heard of, the only mail I get is pro-life fundraising letters and my electric bill. Those are the only two things I get in the mail. I send money to all sorts of organizations. I've never heard of Corpus Christi for Unity and Peace. I don't understand this meeting and how it came together and who's running it, because I have 3 different groups here.
She's right behind
She's
you.
right behind you.
Tell me how
Yeah.
this came together,
Yeah.
why these people are here.
Yeah. Yeah, so Corpus Christi for Unity and Peace was founded over 4 years ago. And I'll just shortcut this, I'm trying to be brief here. But we were founded to defend our Catholic faith and our scriptural beliefs. And what are 3 of those that are being attacked culturally right now, and frankly, sometimes even in the church, I hate to say it: the sanctity of life, the sanctity of marriage, religious liberty, and the 4th is natural law, okay? And really, natural law is what supports, it undergirds those other 3, okay? And if you don't have a democratic republic to defend those things, it's all over. It's game over. And we're seeing that, okay? So CUP, we call it CUP for short, Corpus Christi for Unity and Peace, because it's a mouthful, was founded to defend anyone that defends the faith and those things, all right? And I will go to my grave at defending the preborn, to the point where right now I'm choked up, because I'm telling you, I will go to my grave. I've given my witness before at the 40 Days for Life closing. It's not for here, but it's for another time. I've got reasons for that. But the sanctity of life is the preeminent issue, and no one's going to convince me of anything else.
Talk about your group.
So our group, we're national. It started just in Indiana, but we've expanded nationally. And we started here, right here in Carmel, and then it expanded through Hamilton County, throughout the state, and nationally. I do events 4 to 5 times a year. I have prominent speakers at those events. The one business card that you see on your table, that's Brian Birch, the president and co-founder of Catholic Vote. I don't know if you're aware of who he is. He's a hard get, let's just put it that way. He's the 2nd time I've had him in. But I have events, and it's for education. I also do prayer rallies. I'm hosting a prayer rally that we're going to march around the state capitol on October 7th. And you know what the significance of that is? It's the Battle of Lepanto, where Our Lady of Victory brought victory. But it's also the day before early voting begins. So, yes. So, yeah. So that hopefully that gives you some clarity.
Thank you.
Okay. So,
Vicki, one last comment.
yes.
Your husband can come to these meetings so he can get to see his wife.
Yes. It's turned into a full-time job. I retired from business, and okay, yeah, that's another story. But I have one collective question for you, and this is on free speech. This is on First Amendment. And we are being encroached upon, canceled, forced into silence. I don't know if any of you have felt this pressure to draw back on your comments. I know we've got the pro-lifers who have been sentenced and imprisoned And I don't know if that's, I think it is happening in high schools where pro-life clubs have been launched, and it's happening in universities. What is it that people like us can do, and where is the ray of hope moving forward?
I think you should go first.
Well,
That sounds like a legal question to me.
Yeah.
Well, I fully agree. You know, it's a cultural issue here, right? It's a moral issue. Abortion always has been, as we were saying. People know it's a moral issue. So when I was driving down here, I heard on NPR that the latest poll is that 70% of women want there to be no laws against abortion. 70%. Now, I don't know if that's a valid poll or not, but if I hear it on NPR, I would rather doubt it. But I sense that in the culture, right? So how do you change that? Well, you have to communicate your position. You have to witness the pro-life message to people. And, you know, our job at TMS is to open channels of communication to prevent them from being closed down. So we also have gotten involved with election integrity work in order to allow citizens to get information from government, because the government is very powerful. And if the government has its way, you would have no say-so, right? We know better than you. So that's not how our democratic republic is supposed to operate. And so we want to make sure that people get the information about government that they need, and that they have the right to speak about issues that are important in our country. Now, that all, is premised on people wanting to do something with that information and wanting to say something to their fellow citizens. And, my experience in my job has been that the clients that I work with are very impressive, because they have a backbone and they're willing to stand up and say something. I'm kind of a timid sort of guy who looks around like, I don't, I'm afraid kind of, and we cannot be afraid. So I have to work on that, not to be timid, but to be courageous, not to be rash, not to be cowardly, but to be courageous in giving the pro-life message. So my recommendation, based upon my seeing of our clients and how dynamic the pro-life movement is to ask the Lord to direct you to whatever niche He wants you to get involved with. Like I talked to the gentleman back who says, I want to start something to support women, so we're really helping them. That's great. And so that would be my recommendation. I feel lucky that I, was brought into it. I have my own story, but we won't talk about that. But anyway, everybody has a story and can feel drawn into the beautiful pro-life movement.
I want to leave time for Peggy because she's an elected official and she works in the public square with lights on her all the time. But I want to tell you that I was called by the Lord to change. I was a secular lobbyist for many years, and then the Lord called me into doing this, so I stepped into this. And so my career, my day job is this. And I lost a lot of friends and a lot of colleagues, and I don't care. And even if I walked down the State House, some of my old buddies would turn their back as I walked down the hall. That's okay, because that's my calling, and I expected that. I will tell you that my own family is either A, pro-choice, or B, they hate conflict. So when I go to Thanksgiving or I go to Christmas, no one says, "Hey, Sue, how's your job?" Not once. And so I avoid it. You know, I mean, I try to find little places to go, ha ha ha, you know, life. But I'm afraid too, because this is my family, or my daughter thinks she's pro-choice, I think, but she's very proud of me because she's been a lobbyist too, and she knows how hard it is to pass a bill. So she's very proud of me, even though I think she thinks maybe she's not completely on my side, but that'll change. She's coming. I can feel it. She's coming over. But still, finding the courage. I can stand and testify before the Senate all day long, but at Thanksgiving, I just clam right up. Peggy, do you have a thought of being a public official?
You know, sometimes I just don't grant the interviews. I don't grant an interview to Pop Sugar or some of those other, I can't even think of how ridiculous some of the media outlets are. There are some journalists, and I will say journalists because they legitimately are journalists around the State House. There are a few who, I know their political leanings, I know their position on the topic, but I also understand that they are pretty fair. So I want to get my words out there without it getting twisted. A lot of those interviews have never made it to print. So even though I'll spend 30 minutes talking and we'll have a good conversation, it's not, adversarial, it just doesn't make it out there. So, their words, what do you say, incrementalism to the gentleman in back when I said, all the women of today have only known Roe to be the law of the land. The other side is twisting it. These women are victims of believing that, and they're being used, and they're falling for it. So we just have to wrap our arms around them and walk alongside them, I think, is more effective than telling them you're killing your baby. It doesn't matter if that's the fact. We have to bring them along. Some days I hate what I do. Every year, I literally would go into session thinking, what pro-life bill am I going to do this year? Knowing that it's a slog. And these guys up front are fair game. Typically, I wouldn't name somebody in the audience, but Vicki, you were there testifying on Senate Bill 1. You saw what happened. You waited for hours to testify, and you heard the lies. And so it's one of those things, I can't describe to you what it's like and what we go through. It is exhausting mentally, physically to do this. It is not an easy topic. But I do it because, well, and that's
right.
and I do it because it needs to be done. And I'm mean. I guess you'd say I'm tenacious, but I'm mean. So
She's not mean.
So, thank you, Vicki. I think for all of us, we need to start thinking about not just the political stuff, because that has to happen, but we have got to get the message out as soon as possible about these pills. They are deadly. And I don't think that we've gotten any kind of message out that reminds these girls who take these pills and think, oh, this will be so easy. And they tell them it's like taking a Tylenol, which is the worst and most insidious lie I have ever heard. And so what we need to do is figure out how to get the truth out, to find some young women who have had horrible experiences and are willing to talk about it, and are willing to talk about it a lot, and get them from all over the country so that girls all over the place will understand this is not a free pass from last week's fun. And we've got to make sure they understand this pill is going to make them the murderess of their own child. They can't blame a doctor. They can't blame anybody else who kills that baby is the mommy that took the pill. And they're going to know that for the rest of their lives. And most of them will find in their restroom a dead baby to flush. They need to know that. That's what's really going on. That is the truth. And if we can get some truth out there, through just knowing people and talking about it and getting young women to stand up and say, this is what really happened to me. They told me it was a Tylenol. And I flushed my baby. So we've got to really jump on that. It's there. There's evidence, there's truth. And I'm sure these young women, when they do tell their stories, will be quite poignant in what they say.
Well, I could give you a couple of resources like that. That's a big part of what Voices for Life does.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
building education. So
Yeah.
but it is definitely a need. I also know 40 Days for Life is pivoting, and where abortion clinics have closed, those campaigns are pivoting towards the chemical abortions, and that's going to be the focus there.
Yeah.
And then I also know Pro-Life Action League also has really good materials for us.
So we need to figure out who's
And,
going to
and
help.
Susan B. Anthony and our research arm, Charlotte Lozier Institute, we do videos. We've done videos of women. And we have a whole project. We're trying to get at least one woman from every state that we can find.
Good.
That's very hard to do, by the way, is to find women who will tell their stories. But we're
Right.
really trying to do that and get that to lawmakers as well. But what we need to do is get it to women. Now, I have a theory, and it's not proving well, but if I got my knee replaced, I would tell you, oh man, don't go to Dr. Sones. Be sure to do their therapy. Or I would give you a hint, like, whoa, that was terrible, whatever. I have a feeling, this is so grotesque. Everything you said is exactly right. There's actually a new trauma that's being identified by therapists where she is afraid to go back in her own bathroom because it looked like a crime scene.
It is a crime scene.
And so she's traumatized. So I'm thinking some girls will go, well, Betty Lou, don't do that. That was terrible. But it hurts a lot more than they say it's going to. They bleed a lot more than they say it's going to. And I think that message is starting to get out. But I cannot tell you how many times we've told the New York Times, the Washington Post, Fox News, whatever. But that's not where it's at. It's on their phones. It's TikTok. It's things that you and I don't do, that we don't know. And so who are we working with to get that to young girls? So that's our challenge, is not to be old and fuddy-duddy.
Well, they've got these girls shouting their abortions.
Uh-huh.
We need to get women shouting about what happened to them.
Right.
When they thought it was all safe and easy.
It's starting to happen. It really is starting to happen. It's getting it noticed. That's the hard part.
Thank you. And with that, that's going to wrap up our Q&A. So we're not done, but we're done with that part. So thank you.
Let's everybody thank our panelists and Timothy O'Donnell. Didn't he do a great job on moderating?
You did do a great job. Good job.
Just a wonderful job. And we will have this video on YouTube. Just go to our Corpus Christi for Unity and Peace YouTube channel, and you'll be able to see this under the live tab. I want to draw for our 3 prize winners. So drum roll, please. Oh, very nice. Okay. I'm not drawing. People will blame me. No, Larry, you draw. No, you draw. Yeah, we need 3 winners. And everybody do the ooh and the ah. Okay, so we have look with the baby with the hands. Isn't that lovely? And a Corpus Christi for Unity and Peace hat.
Oh.
You like that? Okay. So who's our first winner? Oh, Roberta Turk. Oh. Did you put your name in 10 times? Okay. And the second winner? Okay. Paul is going to select this. If Paul selects his own name, we're auditing. Okay, Lisa Taylor. Where's Lisa? Oh, Lisa. Okay. Look at that. Isn't that lovely? And you get the baseball hat. Do you like baseball hats? Just lie. Just lie. Okay. All right. And then the third. Yeah. It's okay. It's just a little white lie. This is what I do when I don't wash my hair each day. I'll just put the cap on. Okay. And then Russ Bryant. Where's Russ? Where's Russ? Oh, Russ, come on over. You get Madonna and Child, and you get. Now, do you wear baseball caps? Okay. He gave me the right answer. All right, everybody, round of applause for our 3 winners. All right, what you have in front of you is this beautiful Our Lady of Guadalupe prayer for the unborn, thanks to Carol Fike. And let's thank Carol for that. And then we created this Litany of the Eucharist bookmark, so you can pray that in adoration. And make sure to scan this QR code and register quickly. We're going to sell out of Brian Burke pretty fast, so you want to register quickly for that. And please take these items that Sue brought from the Lozier Institute and Susan B. Anthony, Pro-Life America. Another round of applause for our panelists. And then lastly, you have flower centerpieces on the table. The people whose birthday is closest to August 15th, the Solemnity of the Assumption, August 15th, if your birthday is closest to that, you take that home. God bless everyone. Enjoy. Have a great evening.